Okay. Hello, I'm Alice, part of the programming team here at Leeds International Film Festival. And I'm really thrilled to be joined today by Kate Adams, artist, advocate, parent activist and CEO artist director at Project Artworks, and Tim Corrigan, artist, filmmaker and creative director at Project Artworks. So yeah, thank you so much for Kate and Tim for chatting with me today, and thank you for sharing your wonderful films with us. Yeah, without hesitation, let's dive in with some questions. So for those in the audience that might not know, could you just tell us a bit about Project Artworks, you know, what you do and how the collective came about?
Me or you?
I don't mind. Do you want to go first and I can just add to bits?
So I co-founded, we co-founded Project Artworks like in 1997 after doing some sort of experimental and quite in-depth work, residencies in special schools, and exploring how using all sorts of different materials in a very fluid and responsive way enabled children, whatever their abilities, to create marks, a sort of trace of themselves at any given time, and that we valued that rather than teaching or expecting an artwork from something, from an engagement, or teaching art within a special school. That was a sort of early experiment, and they were quite sensory forms of engagement and very dynamic. And we then continued to develop work in partnership with people, and gradually formed Project Artworks as an organization in order to actually enable people to be represented and to be able to make art on their own terms. Yeah, and we gradually started to use film, didn't we, from about 90.
Yeah, quite early on actually, we started to use film a lot. And yeah, I mean, most recently we've been described as a collective of artists and activists, and we're based in Hastings. And from our studio here, we run a creative program for 40 to 50 neurodivergent artists weekly. And then we work a lot nationally in collaboration with other cultural organisations, and work with lots of different people from the social care sector. The work sort of intersects social care and art, as you probably know, and so the work is really about relationships with firstly individuals in the studio, but families, support teams, the social care sector, other cultural organisations. And so it's really, Project Artworks is really a conversation that's sort of been developing over a number of years at its heart. Yes.
Then we have sort of two bookends of the practice. There's the creative connection that happens in the studio that can be very extraordinary and magical on a daily basis. You're never quite sure what's going to happen. But it's aimed towards real connection, you know, perhaps with people who don't use language to communicate, and to give a sense and a purpose to their creativity. And they develop creative pathways that sometimes go on for years with us, and extraordinary bodies of work. So we have an archive of over 5,500 physical works now that we hold in these our site in Hastings, which is too small for all of those things, so we're bursting at the seams. But then the other side, the other end of the practice is this engagement with a much wider public audience, and with society and the sector, cultural sector, because that's our, you know, that's where we operate, to change attitudes about neurodiversity and disability through productions, exhibitions, and just through showcasing extraordinary work.
Thank you. Yeah, I wondered if you could talk a bit more about the particular role of film in your practice. Obviously, you know, your work is expansive and vast, but yeah, just wanting to hone in now on that particular area, and yeah, the use of film.
Well, I mean, Kate, there are different strands to our film practice, I'd say, and I know that, well, Kate was working a lot with her son Paul and using film a lot, and there was a whole strand of our work that was around kind of measuring the impact of built spaces and environments on people with film, and that was a very particular strand, which, Kate, I don't know if you want to talk about more.
Well, that's just early on in my son Paul's life. He's now 39. He has very complex support needs, an extraordinary man. He doesn't use language to communicate, and when he was small, it took a while to find our way back to him after some pretty extreme diagnoses of what he may or may not be capable of doing when he was grown up. As a small baby, we were given this bleak picture. So one of the things that we did, and I was interested in, is through film, was both recording and documenting a progressive development. And in many ways, when you film and you are in an edit suite, you can see things that you miss in everyday engagement. And so it was very much a process of, well, if we do this, what happens, and then to build on what happened. And to be able to do that, you know, film enhanced that way of working with Paul. And when we first, and I was really interested as well, and actually we worked together, didn't we, Tim, a long time ago on a Wellcome Trust funded project, just to explore, we explored Tate Modern with 4 people with quite complex sort of perceptual differences, actually, and film enabled us to track how they experienced those spaces. And that was a strand of work that gradually became developed within Project Artworks. And then there's the other side, was also using film in workshop settings to enable people to feel as a sort of live recording and projecting it large, so that if someone was unable to actually see their feet, for example, if they were working and they were painting with their feet in a lot of paint, if that was projected on the wall, then there was this sort of totality of experience. So it's a very much used sensory tool.
Yeah, we use film a lot to create different types of environment that people will work within, and that might be stuff that we've recorded ourselves, or live recording, as Kate said, or just other film elements that we'd bring in to create spaces within which people worked. But I think it's always been a reflective practice tool for us, as Kate talked about, and it's always been because the way in which we worked, and there were lots of things happening, and it was a way of us reflecting on the processes that were happening. But also, I think the first major film project we did with Project Artworks was Project Craig, where we worked in schools and daycare centres across the south of England, and we made films about people making work, and we took those films and we put them into public spaces. Because one of our, and the same with actual artworks, it was a way of this trace of this experience, and being able to take that into a mainstream setting and to bring people who are very marginalized into the heart of kind of civic and cultural spaces. And that premise is still the same within most of the work that we still do. It may have become more sophisticated in certain ways, but essentially that's the premise of what we do. And what's really interesting is that for lots of people who are artists, I'd say, of instinct, and maybe not actually perhaps are interested in finished like artifacts, then the art making was all about the process. It was all about the art existed in this moment of making, and this kind of the way that art was a language between people, and it was these very, and so the films themselves were really important to record this and to show this. And actually we've done that a lot now. In most of the exhibitions that we make, we use film to reveal the processes behind the making of artworks, and also to sort of reflect back through detail of sound and image the way in which people, this non-verbal communication that happens all the time with people, can be sort of picked up on and sort of shared.
It's really expansive rather than reductive, actually, non-verbal communication. I think film is able to capture that because it's a wider sort of sensory document. And also one just quick point was that, you know, with Project Craig, we created this image box, we called it, where it was like early public screen projection kind of technology with mirrors and projections. So it was short throws. But it was like a bit like a sort of magic lantern in public spaces that showed this really productive thing happening. But so when you see someone engaged in throwing a bucket of blue paint at a wall, for example, you're not really looking at whether they're disabled or not. You're looking at the spirit of what is happening and what they're able to do. And that's a big function of film within our work, that you bypass all of this sort of medical models that society has for people.
I really love the fast editing that you get in Tessellate, and and to a degree in Modus Operandi. Like I think they really the sounds and the textures that they create is really, there's really something special. And yeah, that makes them like really immersive and playful and dynamic. But I was almost thinking, like, watching Tessellate again, thinking it could be just an audio piece. Like the way it moves between the sounds, I think is just like, is just really excellent. Yeah, I don't know whether you've got anything to say about, I don't know, the way that you'd edit the films, or the kind of choices, the kind of editing choices that are made.
I think with Tessellate, it was very much about this language of Sam. Sam's non-verbal, an autistic man, and we've worked with Sam for a very long period of time, and developed a sort of long-term relationship with Sam. And I think that the film was really about speaking to the language that he creates with all the objects around him in his life, and how he communicates and the rhythm of his life. So yeah, we were very much trying to create something which spoke to that. I spoke immediately to Sam, actually, sort of reflected back that to him. So yeah, I think that, as I was just saying earlier, that yeah, the sort of way in which with sound you can perhaps not try to recreate someone's experience, because you can't do that, and that's not something we're attempting to do. But we're attempting for the films to speak to this non-verbalness, this idea of the language of material, the idea that actually a lot of the work that we do is quite collaborative here, and how art has this sort of function within our practice of communicating and being a language for people. And so this Tessellate was kind of an homage to Sam's non-verbal communication, essentially.
That's brilliant. Yeah, now I wanted to talk a bit about the longest film in our programme, Illuminating the Wildness. And yeah, I just wanted to ask where the idea for that particular film came from, and yeah, if you could talk a bit about the process behind its making.
Well, it's a long story, but long story short, that the idea for it really was to do with, again, the way in which people who have to navigate these neurotypical environments that we construct. It's a construction, you know, it's a constructed space, isn't it? The context of town centres and buildings, and it's usually predicated on a very non-neurodiverse experience. And we were I was just really interested to know how it would be to be out in nature, in the wild, away from these many sort of constructed barriers that people experience, like, and what wilderness is to people. I mean, for many autistic people, for example, you know, the high street is a wilderness on a Saturday morning because it's just like really difficult thing to cope with these sort of too many sounds and unfiltered stimuli. Anyway, so we investigated forests all over the country because we wanted to see whether we could go into the heart of the forest, but actually there's so little wild spaces left in the UK. In the end, the only one that really ticked a lot of boxes was Glen Affric in the Scottish Highlands, which you could still walk away and be able to be away from a mobile signal, you know, 15 miles from a mobile signal, for example. And so we decided just to create a film proposal around going on a trip with 6 people and families and support workers and carers, and spent a week exploring the glens and hills and mountains and a lot of water and rain in Glen Affric. And it was a very interesting experience on multiple levels because we were like an itinerant community in this landscape. And the neurodivergent crew that were there really actually led the whole trip and supported all of us who were slightly falling apart at the seams with the stress of it all, which might not show in the film. Yeah, they held us together.
I mean, I think that's like the Illuminating the Wilderness sort of brought together like different elements actually of our film practice, because we had this idea of environmental impact and kind of being somewhere so remote and sort of, you know, bleakly beautiful as the sort of where we were. It obviously has this incredible impact on us all. And so there was that, but there was also this idea that Kate said, you know, this idea of us as a community and how we, you know, because we work with lots of people who don't self-advocate, and it's really important for us that their voice is heard and that people can lead, you know, elements of our practice. So we always talk about our studios as being sort of a non-hierarchical space where there's real equity, and we try to create environments where people can have equity in kind of in whatever happens. And so, and what's really interesting is that typically a film crew is complete hierarchy from the director down to the clapper load or whatever it is. Everyone sort of knows their place, but we kind of just sort of went with like artists, filmmakers, support workers, families, individuals, you know, so there's a whole group of us, and all the roles were sort of intermingled actually in a really amazing way. And it was incredible actually, this sort of reversal of the typical power dynamic that's associated with kind of working with people who are vulnerable or people who have complex needs. You know, there was a real reversal of that actually, in terms of kind of who was supporting who was the camera, you know, all those roles were sort of beautifully sort of mixed up there. And it was sort of a wonderfully chaotic kind of event. but a really kind of meaningful experience. And I think that was what was really important for us, was that everyone had this meaningful experience. And if we could pick this film up on the way, that would be fantastic. And so, yeah, it was a very special time, actually, to be away with everyone and living together in that way.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't script it, and you know, that was part of the thing that kept us all on edge, and also really alive to everything that was happening, and you know, enabling people to lead what happened as much as possible.
I think you've actually just answered my next question was going to be about the collaborative process, and I think you've both spoken to that really so well. But it completely comes across in the work, and this kind of this non-hierarchical way of working and collaborating. So I think I might just move on to my final question, which is just to ask if you have any more film projects coming up. We would love to hear about them. the next use of film. There's so many ideas and things like that we have in pre-production, and that are just sort of ideas that have existed for a long time, because not only do we have an archive of physical works here, but also we obviously have a digital film archive, which is really an amazing resource. And so there are lots of ideas around how we could use that. I'm currently just actually accessing it a bit, because I'm working on a short film about a family who come to Project Artworks. And anyway, the brother we've worked with for a long time, so it's really interesting to see video of him when he was a child, and so there was lots of ideas. But in turn, we're really looking forward to planning something like Illuminating the Wilderness again, but at the moment we haven't.
Well, we want to, and it's all been output, hasn't it? It's just the output for several years at the moment, you know, with Illuminating the Wilderness, with Explorers, a big national and international project, and then there was the whole Turner Prize stuff, which was very, very intense and extractive in many ways, although great, because it was a really good collaborative outcomes to some of that work. And then we've just done Documenta, which has been so big for us to do, and we've all been, you know, off-site. So what we're it's just lovely to be able to come back, you know, regroup, and we also have a lot of documentation from Documenta that we want to put together into a production, because we connected with so many neurodivergent communities there, and also there was an incredible output of production. So that's something that we want to try and bring into a film production over the next year or so. And there's, as Tim says, there's other things in the pipeline.
We would like another expedition soon, though. Maybe like somewhere warm and less rainy.
I think you should. Oh, well, thank you so much to both of you for speaking with me today, and for bringing your films to our festival. This has been
so much. Thank you so much for showing it.
Yeah.
Thank you.